That statue that stands in front of the Filcom Center. Who's that guy?
It's Jose Rizal.
Jose Rizal. I didn't know his name was Jose.
Yeah.
Serious. And who was he? Why the Filipino community like him, or what did he do?
Yeah, he's one of the recognized national heroes of the Philippines. He was a well-educated person, extremely talented, and he wrote a lot about freedom from Spain. And so that's really the basis. He encouraged a lot of people, especially the educated and people, to rise up. And he was able to manufacture, I would say, his own martyrdom.
Wow.
So that he became a hero of the Philippines, even though the armed revolution started after he died.
Wow. So he was a native Filipino.
He's what's called...
But had Spanish influence.
He is actually, and this is where people don't recognize it in the Philippines even, he was actually part Chinese.
No way.
Yes.
So that's why he has a statue in Chinatown? Kind of?
Probably not, but he has a statue in China.
In China?
Yes.
Wow.
Where his family is from. See, this is part of the ethnic kind of things that go on in the Philippines too. Yeah, where the Chinese are considered a minority, but sometimes privileged minority.
In the Philippines?
In the Philippines.
I didn't know that.
And so, but he was, and he kind of like does not talk about, his being Chinese, even though it's very obvious he was.
So he chose the Filipino side.
Yes. Now, at this time, there's several groups of Filipinos, yeah. There are those who are well-educated. They were, in this case, mixed with Chinese, yeah. So his family was actually merchants. And part of his, one of his names is Mercado, which is the merchant thing, yeah. And there are other, and you might say the lay people, the mass of the Filipinos, who are not well-educated, farmers and all that. And then there's all the Spanish, who are also dominating there, yeah.
When did the Spanish first go into the Philippines?
Oh, this is way back, in 16th century, yeah.
Wow, that early?
Yeah, so 1521 was the idea that Magellan came over. And of course he died. He left his bones there.
And all the last names. So Rizal, so obviously Chinese, Filipino. Speaking of ethnic backgrounds, you are?
Chinese Filipino.
Wow. Is there a lot of Chinese Filipino in general?
There's quite a few.
Or is there more Filipino Spanish?
Well, see, the documentation of Chinese in the Philippines is not well done. They've been there a long time, way before the Spaniards. And so they've had many trade routes going down there. The expansion of Chinese throughout the world is not well documented. They have been all over beyond what we have in our history books.
You went to school where?
Here in Hawaii.
Yeah, where?
I was born
what
here.
High school?
Went to Iolani.
Iolani.
Well, I graduated from Iolani. I went to other public school before. But this is when Iolani was still a boys' school now, yeah?
Wow.
Do you remember that?
I remember that.
Okay.
What was the year? It was, I would just say recently.
It was in the 70s.
Late
they
70s,
changed, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
78, 79?
Yeah, they started to admit girls.
Wow.
So I was, when it was just boys, so we were a little, a different school then.
Iolani School. So as we continue on, I just want to get what high school you went to, ethnic background, but of course we are a cultured show. So as we present Lay in Hawaii, this is how we do it. But of course, the CDC says we have to give it this way now.
Thank you.
Right? So mahalo for being here, sharing some knowledge about our Filipino cousins and some things that we didn't even know. So Iolani,
yes.
When you grew up, what was it like in the household? More Chinese, more Filipino?
Well, my mother was Chinese from Hawaii. My father was an immigrant. Okay, and they met somewhere else, in Guam.
Wow.
And so they both were, kind of like away from home. So when I grew up, actually, Iolani actually did have a few Filipinos there, yeah.
I was just gonna, okay.
It wasn't large, but there were many. I have several classmates, and yet I was close to the Chinese side, which is my mother. Yeah, But my mother didn't speak Chinese. Yeah, my father spoke Tagalog, of course.
Your father was from where?
He was from Manila.
Okay, right in
And
there.
actually, on the Filipino side, I have closer ties to his family, and all the events that he was participating in, which is mostly immigrants. So I actually did not have a strong, you might say, upbringing with the local Filipinos.
I see.
So there's a difference
I was
between
just gonna
local and immigrant Filipinos.
What do you think is the big difference between local Filipinos and Filipino Filipinos? But hold that thought, because we're sitting with our good friend Clement Bautista. Get a little bit more about you, but your knowledge in Filipino culture, I love. This is what's happening on Culturised. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Got any comments? Let us know right down here. Again, talking about kababayan culture. Is that a word? I just made it up.
That could be okay.
We're gonna talk. I want to know what that is. That's why. Right here on Culturised, bringing you what matters. Viewers can receive the Star Advertiser digital full access subscription for just $9.95 per month. Go to staradvertiser.com and click on subscribe. Use the code AHIGHTHING. Aloha Termite and Pest Control, your local and leading pest and termite control solution in the state. Always providing you superior service with Aloha. Differences between, and a lot of people, some people realize, some people don't. There's the Filipinos from the Philippines and then the local Filipinos. What do you think, in your mind, some of the biggest differences?
Okay. One of the biggest differences is the immigrant Filipinos have something to look back to. There is the Philippines. They know they know who they are. They know where the culture is. The younger generation from them probably encounter problems when they go to school, of course.
Right.
And as in my years of education, in education, I see that, and this is where we had to address some of these issues. But the local Filipinos, they've been coming here before 1920s,
Right.
because the sakadas were the first contract workers.
Right.
But there are Filipinos coming here before.
No way.
Yes. One of the more well-known ones is Libornio. I forgot his first name now. Libornio, who was actually with the Royal Hawaiian Band.
So see, now I'm tripping out. So the sakada were the first. They were just the workers.
Contract workers.
I see.
So, yeah.
But like Libornio was.
He
Filipinos
came
here.
over through another ship, and most likely he was recruited because he was a talented composer too.
Oh, so he didn't. Did he play in the band?
Yes, he played.
Wow.
If you look him up, you'll find some very interesting things about him. What songs he wrote, which you'll see. It's
Filipino in the Royal Hawaiian Band.
Yes,
Like, wow.
yes.
And did he write Hawaiian music, Hawaiian songs, or
Hawaiian songs. Yeah.
wow?
And so I think he later on was one of the organizers of the Revolutionary Band.
What's that?
Oh, during the overthrow.
Huh?
During the overthrow.
Okay. I was the
During
ones.
the overthrow,
They were
the Royal
okay.
Hawaiian Band was they were all told to give a loyalty thing, right?
And they split.
They
And then
split
yeah, that's
the
right.
Revolutionary Band.
That's what they were called.
And he was one of the organizers.
Wow.
And they went to the mainland, the U.S. continent, to play, to gather support for the royalty, right?
That's crazy. So was there a lot of Filipinos prior to the sakada,
No.
or just a handful?
No, well, again, not well documented.
Right.
Not well documented. So we know him because he made us.
I gotta look that
he's
up.
notable. And then he went to the band eventually dissipated on the continent, but then he became a very well known composer and band leader in Peru.
So now, when the whole difference is we were talking about the immigrant Filipinos, the local Filipinos. You're learning something every day. What do you think it's harder? It's kind of a weird. Is it harder for a local Filipino to find his culture, or an immigrant Filipino to find a new culture?
Okay. Depending upon the generation. Okay. First generation Filipinos, no matter if it was the old days or today, they know what it means to be Filipino. it has changed over the years, of course, what Filipino is. Yeah, you go to the Philippines today, it's fast moving. Yeah, and it's not everybody is in the barrio. Yeah, and so there's mass media there, so everybody is moving fast. In Asia, generally, is moving faster than the U.S. Yeah, that's one thing. The next generations, just like other immigrant groups, they begin to distance themselves from their parents, and they reject it oftentimes. That second generation,
Right.
And maybe the third or fourth generation, they actually look back and say, "Well, who am I?" Yeah. But generally, the second, third generations, that's the most problematic. Most of the Filipinos, from the 1920s, the children from there, they had problems.
Wow.
So you might say there has been a rejection oftentimes, of being Filipino. I think you probably.
Oh yeah.
You probably know this. Being ashamed of being Filipino, yeah.
Right. That, and I see now it's slowly. Do you think it's coming back now? You have this younger generation. There's this newfound pride of being Filipino.
Well,
But before you answer that, because what I'm thinking of is now you see a lot of these younger Filipinos with Filipino tattoos and trying to find their culture.
Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on that. If you're joining us, this is Culturised. We're talking Filipino culture in Hawaii, learning something new every day. There was a Filipino in the Royal Hawaiian Band before Filipino immigrants came to Hawaii. I'm learning something. Clement Bautista is here telling us all about that. We're learning culture, and I'm loving this because part of a huge part of me is Filipino, and then of course I feel guilty because I don't know everything. I mean, I'm not supposed to know it, but I know some things. But I want to go back to this musician composer real quick. So the song was Kaulana Napua.
Kaulana Napua, yeah.
He composed the music.
There was a lot of controversy, of course, because everybody wants to claim it.
Right.
But someone else wrote the lyrics, of course.
Right.
It was from a poem, and she wrote it just precisely, because of the overthrow. Yeah, and so, but it was set to his music.
So
and the reason why people know that is that Amy Stillwell did some research on this, and so finding the copyright. So it was copyrighted already in the Library of Congress. Yeah.
Wow. So somebody got to see. Wow, Kaulana. So if you didn't, Kaulana Napua, every time you dance that song or sing that song, my Filipino friends, composed by a Filipino. As we move on, so we're talking about local Filipinos, immigrant Filipinos.
Yeah.
And today I see a lot of younger Filipinos looking back.
Yeah.
They got the Filipino tattoos. There's this revival in Filipino or Borneo even tattooing. Do you think, I'm going to ask you, this is your opinion. Do you think that's a facade, or they're actually because it's cool, or they're taking a genuine dive?
Okay. My own idea of ethnic identity, is that it's not something like it's there. It's always created. Okay. Now, one other factor you have in here is that there's one more species of Filipino, the mainland one.
Wow, that's true.
The one that's coming here, and the one that and it's very popular actually in the media too. Practically more popular than the local Filipinos here. Yeah. So they are definitely inundating the media today with being Filipino. Which is good, but it is a different sort.
How so?
Well, they grew up in a different world. So ethnic identity or any identity is always created not just by you yourself, by the environment, the context of who you're with. So they grew up in a different context.
That's right.
The local Filipinos here grew up in a different context too.
Right.
So that's why, in some senses, they have this. We had that old idea, romantic idea of everybody getting along with each other. Yeah. Yeah, all this ethnic multiculturalism here from the plantation.
Right.
Boy, life was so great on the plantations, right? We all brought along with each other. Not right? Not true. And so we got that image, however, and that's been perpetuated locally. Mainland culture it's much. They grew up in as more hardcore minorities. Yeah, and so they are ashamed of being Filipino too.
So
now.
they're a little bit more callous. They're a little bit more.
They're more aggressive, you might say. But many of them, especially I know those who grew up in L.A., they wanted to be Latino.
See, we always used to say that too. We always say, oh, those mainland Filipinos, right? And when we would go there, we would notice how different local Hawaii Filipinos were with mainland Filipinos, and then to Filipino from Philippines. Wow.
Yeah, because if you go to mainland, from a local site, you say, "Oh, no, don't be so, brash,"
Exactly, and they just, even my cousins, my Filipino cousins, they really wanted to be somebody else rather than Filipino. Interesting.
So they're always creating this identity, and there has been discussions about that. Do you have to relate to the Philippines to be Filipino?
Again, this question always comes up. It's like, are you Filipino enough? Even Hawaiians, are you Hawaiian enough? We had another episode talking to Dr. Lene about are you Native American enough?
Yes. One of the major kind of like controversies in Filipino historians and the conferences you go to is authenticity. Who's more authentic?
Who's more
you
authentic?
or me? Kind of thing.
And so wherever the great thing I see it in wherever Filipinos go, they create a culture of their own, whether they're in the Midwest, whether in New York. But it's funny because it's very different at the same time. We're all Filipino.
Yeah.
If you have any questions about Filipinos, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching us on YouTube. Comment down below. We're talking Filipino culture. I am kind of tripping out on the things I'm learning, and that's what this is all about. If you want to learn about culture, this is where we do it. I realize it, but I didn't realize it. You got immigrant Filipino. We're talking contemporary today. We've got local Hawaii Filipino, and we've got mainland Filipino. And even there, we've got like the West Coast Filipinos are definitely different from the East Coast Filipinos. Do you think that's a good thing?
It's a reality.
There you go.
It happens. Just like everyone else is going to have same kind of divisions or differences. This is part of creating identity. I think any one of us has multiple identities depending upon who we're with.
So as far as we look at Filipinos, so there's Tagalog, or is that just the language? See, some people are like, is that the language or is that the person?
Yeah, this can get very political actually. Because it is a language, it is a language, and at one point in time in the Philippines, the Department of Education or Ministry of Education decided to create a national language,
and
which would take in different, parts of the languages from all over the Philippines and put into one, and everybody would learn what's called Filipino. Most people in where they speak Tagalog said, "Great, we have all these words from other languages." People from other regions.
So now you get like Ilocos Norte, Ilocos
Sur. Oh no, that's not ours. That's not. Filipino is Tagalog.
So how many different languages are there in the Philippines?
Or
is there like multiple?
There's many. There's the main ones are Ilocano, Tagalog, and Cebuano. But there are many others. There's
within.
Yeah, there's many deviations from that. There's also just others that are not popular.
And then I don't even want to say ethnic wise, but there's Ilocano, there's Visayan.
Yeah. And you realize there's also North and South Ilocos, yeah. So
right. So Ilocos Sur,
South, Ilocos Sur, yeah, and Ilocos Norte, and other regions who speak Ilocano too.
And so I always see Pangasinan.
Yeah.
That's
okay. Here's another related to the Philippines. Ilocanos have often moved around, and so they've also moved around to the market areas, to the business areas, in all over northern Luzon. Pangasinan has its own language, Pangalatot.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very difficult, for other people to learn, and some people make fun of it too because it sounds different. But today, if you live in Pangasinan, you got to speak both Pangalatot and Ilocano.
Wow.
Because Ilocanos have taken over a lot of the business areas in northern Luzon.
No, I mean, Filipinos are, I always like to joke, but they're everywhere.
In the world.
In the world.
I got relatives all over the world, yes. Dubai and everywhere.
What are things in your mind that Filipinos have given, not just to the world, but just like outside of the Philippines? Like, you come to Hawaii, it's obviously the food.
Yeah.
Right.
The food is everywhere. There was a recent video that someone sent me, my relative sent me from Dubai. They're doing a Filipino restaurant thing in Dubai. Not this is Filipino food, but what's the best Filipino restaurant in Dubai?
Wow.
So there are more than one.
Because if you think about it, like everybody, lumpia, halo-halo,
Yeah.
pancit, right? Are there things outside, like traditional-wise or cultural-wise? What have the Filipinos given to, let's just say Hawaii?
Well, Hawaii, if you could just make a comment about this food here in Hawaii. For the longest time, and I'm probably a little older than you, yeah. We were wondering why is this Filipino food not recognized as opposed to the others. We have local food, but local food is generally Japanese.
Right.
So Filipino food has taken a long time, and it wasn't, I think, until the mainland Filipinos were really pushing lumpia all over the world.
Right.
That lumpia all of a sudden, egg rolls became lumpia.
It became the national food.
Yeah. And so Filipinos have been very slow to take hold here, except I believe, the music, of course. The music, the musicians. In my days, locally, there's a very famous group, Society of Seven, mostly Filipino.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was one thing that was nice because their musicians spread all over the world, Japan, everywhere,
Filipinos were so talented. If you're joining us on YouTube, we got the extended version. We're going to talk a little bit more about Filipinos, but really quick, I want to say mahalo for joining us this afternoon, taking time talking about Filipino culture. We're going to continue to do that on our YouTube channel, on our webpage at culturised.com. Hey, what's going on? It's me, Makani. Welcome to Culturised, the extended version right here on YouTube. Don't forget, hit the subscribe. I think it's a bell. Make a comment down below. All my Filipino cousins, let us know what you think. Talking with Clement Bautista about ethnic identity, specifically Filipinos. And we covered quite a bit. Learned some things. Right off the top, Kaulana Napua, man, composed by a Filipino. And the different ethnicities, the different languages. And the talents and we're talking about what Filipinos has given to Hawaii, and we talk about SOS, Society of Seven, right? In my generation, I'd probably say one of the greatest Filipino bands ever. Every Filipino I know, besides me and my brothers, are talented. Can you sing?
No.
Everyone I know, they can sing, they can play. My grandparents, my parents, they did everything.
Yeah. But I think part of it is, I know a lot of people who want to sing, but they really cannot. They should not.
That is true. It's like false hope. And so I always think about these things when it comes to Filipinos. Any Filipino household, we joke about it, but a lot of times it's true. Like you go in the house, there's a wooden carabao next to the couch, right? And this is something I just learned too: the difference between a buffalo and a bison. Right? The Filipinos got the buffalo, and the Native Americans got the bison. And then the knives.
Yep.
The province, all the province. How many different provinces are there? Do you know?
I couldn't tell you right now offhand. No.
What else was
but the fork and the spoon,
The fork and the spoon. I think only Filipinos have that. Or this may be a Portuguese thing too, because I've seen it in Portuguese households. But the plastic over the. Where did all those things come from?
I think a lot of the plastic, Chinese homes here in Hawaii had that too.
Okay.
The little bumpy ones, So it was not only Filipinos who have it, and it's to preserve the material.
So that was more of a local thing, because I always wonder.
Philippines had it too. But it's preserved the material. So it's just we used to have plastic on the rug.
That runner. And so all these things I think about in Philippines, even growing up, I would always think, man, we had all these things in our homes. I think, is that what? If you go to a home in the Philippines, would they have the same thing?
Sometimes, it's changing now, of course, but it was costly to replace anything, and it's easier to clean up, right?
Yeah.
So,
Sakada, what is it now? What 1926?
The 24.
24. So if you're wondering about the sakada, so again, we're going back, but they were the first contracted workers. When did it stop? How many?
1946 was the last sakadas. Yeah.
I heard there was 100 that came over, or is that just a rough estimate, or was there thousands that came over? The first contracted ones.
The story that you actually, if you find, if you can look at the history stuff, is that this is at a time when the plantation owners wanted to stop Japanese workers. So they're too much trouble. Yeah, they're always going on strike. So they're looking to other sources of labor, and the Philippines, of course, was a colony of the U.S., and so they could easily get people to come over. And so they sent over people to recruit Filipinos, and they wanted 100. They wanted 100 Filipinos to come over. So they were
specific.
Yeah, they got like 20. Yeah. Okay, because because it was hard. It's hard to actually recruit, and I don't know if you could imagine. This is back in the turn of the century when the U.S. was just over fighting the Philippines. Yeah. Filipino-American War, people don't recognize either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was a bloody war, and these recruiters came over to recruit workers to come to Hawaii. In the Philippines, nobody knows what Hawaii is, right? Especially at this time, And so, if you can imagine, the plantation owners going there to the Philippines, mostly Filipinos are there. And who are they going to talk to? They had a hard time recruiting because they don't know how to talk to the people. They're just among themselves.
Wow.
Just like here, plantation workers here, plantation owners here are really among themselves. We're talking about early 20th century. And so they didn't recruit many, and actually they decided we're going to use these people as publicity stunt. We bring them over, we'll get them to see how wonderful it is to be here, and they can go back and tell their friends.
That's it. So those are.
And so it was mainly for publicity that they came over. When they came over, they went to the plantation. They spoke to guess who? Japanese guys. Japanese guys, and they told them how bad it was. And so actually, off that original 20 workers, only half of them stayed.
Wow.
Half of them went back, to bring more people. But it took a while before they could actually bring people en masse.
As we slowly wrap up, is there any Filipino traditions that you yourself still practice in your household? Like
well, we're not religious, so we don't do the religious stuff. And although because of all these other events that I'm with or groups, we do a Pasko, Christmas stuff. I do fiesta, because I'm with the Philcom, and so we do practice those things. I do organize things for that.
I remember growing up, we used to have barrio fiesta.
Yeah.
Do they still do that?
Everybody get barrio fiesta.
Every ethnicity would build their bamboo shack.
Every group. Well, fiesta in the have you been to the Philippines?
Once.
Where?
Manila.
Oh,
I know it doesn't count.
They don't count. That's a mega city, mega city like any other. Except if you go to the barrios in the outside, and it's just, I used to when I worked at UH, I always encourage others, younger folks, if you really want to know what it is to be Filipino, you got to go to the Philippines. Because you're going to discover a whole new part of you.
And you got to pump your own water.
That's still there, yeah. I assume it's still there. When I went, I did. I went back to the Philippines to discover who I was.
Wow.
And I think it's worthwhile for people to go there and see, well, gee, I was missing a whole world when I growing up here. And all the things you say, if you're ashamed of things like that, or your friends were always making fun of you, you'll see how beautiful it is there.
I like that. We'll leave it at that note. If you want it, and that's one of the greatest ways to figure out who you are. Identify yourself as go back, as they say, to the motherland.
Yeah.
Clement Bautista, mahalo. Salamat po for being here and sharing some Filipino culture with us. Again, the extended version on YouTube, you want to comment right down below, hit the subscribe button. You want to learn more, you're going to have to come hang out with us right here on Culturised.com.